Recording. Hello, everybody. I'm Karen Sullivan, publisher of Arenda Books. And for those of you who haven't met us yet, we're a small independent publisher based in London, publishing literary fiction with a heavy emphasis on crime thrillers. Half of our list is in translation, and we publish authors from 50, I'm just turning the music off, a little distracting. We publish authors from 15 nations. Iceland obviously features very heavily, and we are absolutely honored to have Ragnar Jónasson here tonight from Iceland in conversation with the one and only Ian Rankin. So we just won this year the CWA Crime and Mystery Publisher of the Year, which is the most exciting thing to happen in 2020, believe me. And we're delighted that you could be here. Winterkill is the final installment, but perhaps not if we can persuade Ragnar to write another one, in the multi-million copy best-selling Dark Iceland series. It was translated from the French by David Warner because they published it first in this, before Iceland in this case. David sadly can't be with us tonight, but I hope he's in the audience and able to watch from wherever he is. So the first two books in the Dark Iceland series, Snowblind and Nightblind, were the first books that I signed when I started Arenda Books in 2014. And the success of this series has been incomparable. When we published Snowblind in 2015, it flew straight to the top of the Kindle charts, knocking The Girl on the Train off the top of the charts for the first time in 9 months. And we haven't looked back since that day. Rights for the Dark Iceland series have been sold in 32 countries. Is that right, Ragnar?
Yeah.
You're going to say 33, right? Is that right?
Yep.
Yes, okay.
Yep.
And Ragnar has sold well over 1.5 million books around the world. Okay, tonight, as I said, we're going to be joined by Ian Rankin, who is right there from Edinburgh, and he's going to be talking about his own incredibly moving and quite majestic A Song for Dark Times, which is right up here. It seems quite fitting that all of you are together because it was the very same weekend at Bloody Scotland that I met Ian and Ragnar for the first time when we played football together at Bloody Scotland in the annual hard fought match. And I'm going to try here to share my screen and show you the evidence of this. Here we go. Hold on, little technical issue here. Can you see that?
Hey.
So that was 14 actually. And you'll see some familiar faces there. Okay. All right, moving swiftly on. I'll just get rid of that. Okay, so welcome.
Like I've walked into a really interesting discotheque here.
Pardon?
I feel like I've walked into a really interesting discotheque.
Yeah. Okay, right. And Ian Rankin live from Edinburgh. So leading the proceedings tonight is our amazing Dr. Noir Jacky Collins, founder of Newcastle Noir Crime Festival and crime fiction aficionado. Jackie's a former senior lecturer at Northumbria University in literature, film and TV and Spanish language and culture. She's currently based at Stirling University in Scotland, and she's coming to us live from Edinburgh, but not with Ian. Jacky co-hosts a fortnightly crime fiction radio program on Spice FM. She hosts literary events with the Honey and Stag events team and is a member of the Coriolis Books team, a new independent publisher of translated crime fiction from Romania, Iceland, and beyond. So Jacky will properly introduce these immense writers and their books. But before I turn you over to her, capable hands, I just wanted to mention a few things. First of all, our partner bookshop tonight is the incredible Goldsboro Books, and this is the place to get signed copies of Winterkill and A Song for Dark Times. And if you order now, you'll receive them in time for Christmas. In fact, they aren't just perfect reads for you, they are the ultimate Christmas gift for any crime fiction lover. So Goldsboro, of course, is an amazing bookshop, and we're honored to support them. Co-owner David Headley is also Ragnar's agent and one of the most respected booksellers in the country, in the business, in fact. As you know, independent bookshops need all the help they can get right now. And this goes a long way towards keeping great bookshops on our high streets and in towns and villages, and ensuring that you have the best books in your hands. So it's Goldsboro Books. I'd also like to thank the Icelandic Literature Centre and the Icelandic Embassy in London for their ongoing support. And now I'm going to hand you over to the brilliant Jacky. And if you have a question at any point, there's a little chat button at the bottom of your screen where you can ask some questions. We'll leave lots of time at the end to go through it. So I'll pass it over to you now, Jacky.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Karen, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be moderating two of the most amazing crime writers about. This is a little bit of a dream come true. I have never ever managed to be in the right place with Ian, and so to be able to interview Ian Rankin or just to be in conversation tonight is an absolute thrill. But then you put on top of that the chance to celebrate a book launch, one of Ragnar's amazing books, the next in the series. I'm hoping it won't be the last, but that's another matter altogether. And just for everybody out there, you know, 2020 has been a bit of a difficult year, to say the least. And the fact that, Karen, you've made this evening possible, brought us together to celebrate what many of us are just, you know, crazy about, and that is crime fiction. Good evening, Ian. Good evening, Ragnar. I hope you're both well and ready for just a good old natter about two rather fine books.
Well, I'm more than ready, because Ragnar invited me to Reykjavik this year. So a couple of weeks ago, I should have been there as part of the Icelandic Crime Fiction Festival. Sadly, because of COVID, that was cancelled. So very frustrating, but we're hoping for better things next year, eh, Ragnar?
Yeah, we'll do it next 1 year from now. We'll all be in Reykjavik.
Wonderful, wonderful. Because as wonderful as this is, there's nothing quite like joining together in Reykjavik of all places and enjoying that company. And I have to say, Ragnar, Iceland Noir, you know, the hospitality there and the setting and the way you put together that festival is something quite special. So here's to being able to come over and join you all then. Award-winning authors, I mean, multi-award-winning Ian Rankin, multi-million copy worldwide bestseller. It seems, I don't think I can do you justice, Ian. And the same with you, Ragnar. In such a short space of time, Ragnar, you've become one of those household names for crime fiction around the world. And from when I first met you in 2013, 14, and you were quite a shy individual, and now, you know, your name, I remember just seeing the other day, your name around, is it the Paris streets on the bus, the bus shelters? Yeah, I mean, so it's like two authors whose trajectories are just amazing. But let's get into the nitty gritty. Ragnar, I wanted to start off, and I found as I was reading both your books, there's some commonalities there. And I want to set off by asking you, at the beginning of both your books, there's two quotes that I want to ask you about, why you chose them and what they mean to you. And yours, Ragnar's, is, if I just turn over, get the right page. Then all the ills of winter are swept away. Could you talk to us a little bit about that quote?
Yes. So this is a quote from my late grandfather, who lived in Siglufjörður, and so my grandparents living there is of course the reason I'm writing books set in Siglufjörður. And he wrote a lot. He had a full daytime job his whole life, but he was always writing. And then when he was 80 or so, he started publishing his work. So he published 5 books between the age of 80 and 90.
Wow.
And And this quote is from one of my favorite pieces by my grandfather, which is it's just a short article that I think I had included in one of my earlier books as an appendix, that describes the way that the feeling when the sun reappears over the mountains of Siglufjörður in January, because what happens in November is that the mountains are so high and the sun is so low that there is no sunlight on the town for more than 2 months. And so he wrote this lovely article describing the feeling, what happens when finally they have this day. They call it the day of the sun, and they celebrate with pancakes and coffee. And then he says at the end of the article that all of the ills of winter are swept away. And that is actually the title of the book in Icelandic, is Vetrarmein, which is taken directly from this quote as the ills of winter. Mm. So it was translated slightly differently in the UK version.
Mm. Ragnar, I love the way that it links you to your past with your family, and it links to your links with that town as well. It's a beautiful choice. But Ian, I wonder the choice of yours, Jon Ronson. We love making damaged people our playthings.
Yeah, that was a quote. When I read it, I just thought, oh, that could be useful to me at some point in the future. So I wrote it on a scrap of paper and put it into my big box of ideas, which is sitting here by my side, which contains cuttings from newspapers, ideas for stories, character names, you name it. I'm thinking at some point in the future I might be able to use that. And a lot of crime fiction revolves around that notion that the person committing the crime may be damaged in some way, or they may be controlled by someone who is using them as a means to get something they want. And it kind of harks back slightly, I think, to a book called Confessions of a Justified Sinner, which is my kind of ur-text for crime fiction. It was one of the first serial killer novels, Scottish, Memoirs and Confessions of a Justified Sinner, and was a precursor to Jekyll and Hyde and many other books. And in that book, a young religious zealot meets a charismatic stranger who persuades him that because he is going to go to heaven, he can do whatever he wants on earth, including killing people. And he ends up killing his own brother. And you're never sure if this charismatic stranger is the devil or a figment of his fevered imagination. So you've got a kind of Jekyll and Hyde potential in that story. It was that notion of the kind of damaged person, how they could be manipulated in some way. And I just thought, if I'm going to use it, without giving too much away about this book, this might be a good book. And my publishers got in touch with Jon Ronson, and he was very happy for it to be quoted.
Thank you for sharing that. I always look at the beginning of books, because to me it's that idea of authors choose these things not just for the sake of it, but that there's a lot of thought goes into it. So thank you for setting us off on the beginning of these books, these journeys. Now, Ragnar, Winterkill begins on Easter Thursday, and again, just your choice of that time of year. I mean, you could have set this at any time of year, the middle of winter, or just coming out of January, as you say, when that light starts to shine again. Why choose Easter?
I think that was a decision I made years ago, because it's been 5 years since I wrote the last book about Ari. But this one has always been, in my computer, sort of partly written, and it took me some time to find the time to actually finish it. But it was, as I say, probably 5 years ago, I was spending Easter at Siglufjörður, and it's a wonderful time of year. It's usually a lot of snow, and the day is getting brighter and brighter. So I thought, why not do one story that's set at this time? And we have a very long Easter break in Iceland. So we start on the Thursday, and we have a holiday until the Monday after Easter. So it's a 5-day holiday, and people either tend to go abroad or just go skiing in Iceland. And Siglufjörður is a perfect place to ski. So the town really takes on like a different form at Easter. Probably quite a unique time to be in Siglufjörður, because you have these, all the hotel is full, and the town is very vibrant. And it's very different from Christmas, when you probably just have the locals there more or less, and different from summer as well, in just terms of climate and sort of the darkness that is still looming around. And also, it was just like a part of this year that I hadn't written about. I've written about Christmas, I've written about the winter, the height of summer. So it's sort of, I think, closed the circle of stories about Siglufjörður.
Mhm.
I wondered, Ragnar, if there was also a notion of resurrection when Ari's wife and child come to visit and stay, and there's a potential for them to get back together again. I thought, aha, maybe he's going to set us up for a lovely, happy ending.
I don't think I ever give anyone a happy ending in these books. No, it is a dark crime novel, so everyone's miserable at the end. But no, I think it's no. Actually, when I started writing this novel, I thought if this is the final book in the series, it should have in some way a nice ending, sorts. And I hope it does. And in that way, I think you're right. And also, it's just obviously a strong symbolic time of year, Easter, and with Ari and his problems in the past and his sort of religious background, I think there's quite a lot to work with there.
Without giving anything away, just joining on to what Ian was saying, I wondered whether the ending was this idea of, being born again in a way, or something like that. But maybe that's a bit too deep, meaningful and reading. So I will move on. And I wonder if at this point, because I'm conscious of time, and you've both said that you'd be so good as to read. So Ian, you said you'd do the honours as the warm-up act, and you'd.
Yep. I'm happy to be the warm-up act, but I'm not going to read from my book. I'm going to read from a play that I wrote during lockdown. The National Theatre of Scotland asked me to do a scene that would say something about lockdown and COVID, and I wrote a very short piece about Rebus in lockdown, which they then got the actor Brian Cox to perform. He was in lockdown in upper state New York. I was watching on this very laptop in Edinburgh. The director was in Glasgow. It's online. You can see it at YouTube if you look up Rebus Lockdown Blues. So I'm just going to read a very short extract from this one scene play. This is Rebus talking. I miss the pub. Pubs plural. All pubs, many and various. I'd even risk the ones I wouldn't normally visit. As an ex-cop, there are places you learn to avoid. People there with long memories, and your face might be the one to set them off. But I'd risk it right now, even at my age and in my condition. I could murder a pint. Cans and bottles, just not the same, are they? And God knows I've persevered. If you'd asked me, I'd have said I'm not the most sociable type, but a wee bit of chat or even unspoken proximity to a few other fellow human beings who are as interested as I am in monk-like contemplation of the contents of their glass. Murder a pint I could. Instead of which, Siobhan rings the bell, leaves a bag or two at the door. I'm supposed to wait 20 seconds before I retrieve it, by which time she's halfway down the tenement stairwell. So we have another brief catch-up, socially distanced. She can't tell me about cases she's working, walls having ears, confidentiality and all that. And it's not like I have much news to report. Maybe she'll explain what's in the bags, any substitutions or wee treats. I made a pot of vegetable soup the other day, just leek, potato, onion, Took me back to my dad stirring away at the stove. One of the few things he knew how to cook after my mum died, all because Siobhan had left me the makings along with a recipe. Then it's back indoors, empty out the contents, ready meals, sausage, eggs, milk, bread, dog food, the basics, in other words. She'll have added apples or bananas, trying to get me eating more of my 5 a day. A newspaper, sometimes 2, plus a few cans or bottles, though she tells me I shouldn't. Supposed to be looking after myself. The government says I'm high risk, so I must be. That's my age, plus the COPD. The last thing my long-suffering lungs need is the virus or a wee touch of pneumonia. Dog food's not for me, by the way. It's for the dog, Brillo. Though I remember reading somewhere that in America more pensioners than pets eat pet food. Some of it doesn't smell too bad either. I mean, if you were served it in a pie in one of those pubs I don't go into, well, would you even notice?
And the question is, Ian, thank you so much. To be able to go back into a pub, even if they did put that in the pie, I think it'd be worth it right now, just to be back in company, yeah?
Yeah, I agree. And I think small bars like the Oxford Bar are going to find it very difficult to reopen because social distancing is not only impossible, but it is anathema to them. These are places where you go there to be sociable.
Yeah.
You go there to rub shoulders, to stand at the bar with people you don't know and hear their stories and tell your stories. Sitting 6 feet away from everybody else at a table is just not what these pubs are about. So it's going to be very difficult, very difficult. And I do mourn them with my wee glass of red wine.
Totally with you, totally. And thank you for that reading. Thank you for sharing that with us. And again, that insight into Rebus living these moments as we're living them. Ragnar, I wanted to talk, if we can now, about your main protagonist, seeing as Ian's taken us in with the notion of main protagonists. And I've always been intrigued, and I've never asked you this. The fact, all the work that you did on the Agatha Christie novels, and you know, that idea, many of those being amateur sleuths, I'm thinking Miss Marple, but why did you choose, when you first began, a police procedural?
Actually, I didn't, because the first time I wrote about Ari, it was a short novel. It's never been translated, actually. Where he is just a young guy looking for his father who'd gone missing. And at that point, Ari is studying to become, he's studying theology. And there wasn't really, not necessarily supposed to be a sequel to that. But my publisher in Iceland asked for a second book, and he suggested I would use the same lead character, and then I had to get creative in how that would work, and so he stopped his studies at university and went on to study to become a policeman. Sort of his interest in that was sparked by his investigation into his disappearance of his missing father, and yeah, so it was sort of a police procedural by accident, and I actually don't think it really is, because it's more about Ari, and he just happens to be a policeman because that's what this format sort of requires. I would love for him to just be a priest or whatever, or philosophy student as he used to be before that. But it sort of stretches the imagination to have him solve a lot of crimes in that capacity.
Yeah, I understand what you mean, and I wanted to ask you as well. 6 books on, and I'll put the same to Ian, that evolution of that character. But first to you, Ragnar, the idea of Ari Thor's evolution over those books. How do you feel he's developed?
I think he's developed quite a lot, and he was a very sort of young and innocent guy at the start of the series, and I think we've seen more and more of his darker sides as you know, as we move into the series, and more of his sort of humanity as well. And that has, in a way, just been yeah, sort of a natural development for him. I mean, as I say, when I started writing, I didn't really, you know what would happen and how his life would evolve, and it's just happened a lot, you know, as he's developed in each book, and that's been interesting for me as well, and you know, so I've grown to like him.
Yeah, and you know, reading Winterkill, and where he's at that point of, you know, in his career, he's come to a certain place, in his relationship, he's come to a certain place, and you get that sense of almost at a crossroads, and a very interesting place to bring him, I think. And then, so linking that to you, Ian, and where in A Song for the Dark Times, you know, since that first novel, did you ever think that John Rebus would bring you to this point?
Oh, no. I mean, the first book was written with no idea that I was even really writing crime fiction. I just decided he would be a cop who would lead me through the city and talk about the city. I didn't read crime fiction at that time. I watched it on TV and movies, but I didn't actually read Agatha Christie or any of the greats of crime fiction until I started writing crime fiction. And he seemed to have a natural lifespan. I mean, that one book at the end, I killed him off in the first draft and then brought him back again. And I thought maybe I had 2 or 3 books and that'll be him. But I started to get, maybe with Ari, similar thing. He just got inside my head and refused to leave. I just found him a really interesting character, and he began to develop. And to find out more about him and his development, I had to keep writing the books. And then we get to a point with Exit Music, 17 books into the series, where I'm told by a cop that he has to retire because he's now 60 years old. So he retires. I thought that was the end. I thought, okay, we're done. But I found a way to bring him back. He demanded to come back. But he was an older guy now, so he's no longer a detective. He's a pensioner. He's got health problems. So that is a challenge for me, but also an opportunity, so that I'm still interested in him, because his life again has evolved. He's not the guy he was in the early books. He's not the macho, physical, hard-boiled detective of the early books. He's someone who's very aware of his mortality and aware of his frailty. When he gets in a fight now, he loses consistently, and he fears getting in a fight, because if he gets in a fight, he knows he will lose, and that's a blow to his masculinity. So he tries not to get into fights in the first place. So whenever I start writing a book, I get excited about this guy who is slightly new to me. Although I've known him for over 30 years, he's not the same guy that I used to know. And certainly in this book, I mean, the challenge was when he goes up to the far north of Scotland because his daughter's partner has gone missing. Is he going to arrive there as a parent who will fight to protect her and think her innocent? If he thinks she's guilty, he will try and protect her, including putting someone else in the frame for the crime. Or is he going there as a detective? Because detection is in his DNA. And therefore, if he starts to suspect she played a role in the disappearance, will he try and put her away? And so I could see a really interesting dynamic between him and his daughter. And that just made it a very exciting story at an emotional level for me. And then slightly, as Ragnar has alluded to, the tropes of the crime novel come in later. The need for red herrings, the need for detection actually comes in later. But the bones of this story was a story about a parent and a child.
Thank you. Parent and child dynamic for both of you, whilst those children may be at different ages. And the strapline to Ian's book is "Family comes first."
Even before the truth.
Even before the truth. And for both your detectives, I wonder, has that been the case? Just thinking of their circumstances, Ragnar, for people who maybe haven't had the chance to read the novels coming up to now, can you talk us a little bit about Ari Thór's family situation?
Yes. So Ari, he's had this girlfriend throughout the series, even from book 0, the first one before Snowblind. He was always he had this girl called Christine. But as the things have progressed, I mean, they've been sort of on and off in the series, and in Snowblind he made some mistakes and almost lost her for a while, and then they managed to get back together. But it's always been like a quite tense relationship. So I thought, in this book I would sort of try and sort it all out, and we'd see how that would end. But through in the middle of the series, they had a child who was actually born on Christmas Eve. Maybe referring again to the sort of resurrection and the religious background of Ari, and so that child is now, I think, 3 years old or something in this new book, and they are separated at the beginning of the story. She lives abroad. She's a doctor, and she's studying, adding on to her education in Sweden, and so he isn't really in touch with his son as much as he would want to. I mean, they just speak or see each other on Zoom or whatever it would be, and he's meeting him for the first time in months for Easter in the book. So he's really trying to. So the book is quite a lot about this relationship and his. I think Aris really says on that he is sort of losing touch and missing out on opportunities to be with his son and to watch his son sort of grow up because of this long distance non-relationship, and on top of that, when he finally gets this opportunity for Easter, I mean, there is this investigation basically lands on top of him, on top of everything else. He needs to figure out his priorities and usually makes the wrong decisions.
And I love the fact that in both of these men, it's that they cannot help themselves. It's like something runs so deep. That, Rebus is retired. Ari Thor gets the chance to be in this family unit and maybe but it's the investigation that is the strongest thing. Ragnar, I wonder, could you do us the real honors and read us a little section?
Yeah, I can, absolutely. Which language would you prefer?
Oh, don't tempt. I would like both myself, but
French.
All 3 versions here. The French one is the one I would least prefer to read because I would for everyone. And I have Ian's book here. Ian, congratulations on this fantastic book, and thank you for being with us as well.
Oh, thank you, Ragnar.
So in English then, yeah?
Yes.
yes.
And I have Siglufjörður here in the background, as you may have noticed.
That's very interesting that you should say that, because Mary Pickin, I was going to save Mary's question until we brought in other people's questions, but Mary right from the outset asked that question. So
yeah, so this is Siglufjörður in winter, and I also have actually another picture here that I should probably share with you. This is the only known picture of Ari. And this is something that was done for the Japanese cover of Snowblind or Nightblind by a Japanese artist, and I just emailed him and asked if I could buy the original, and he very kindly let me do that. So this is
beautiful.
As far as I know, this is how what Ari looks like. So I think I'll just read a little bit from the start. Night and day were much the same in Siglufjörður in summer, when the sun barely set at all. It was Ari Thór's favorite time of year, It was just a couple of months away now, and for him it couldn't come soon enough. He loved the sense of infinite freedom that came with the long hours of daylight in the north of Iceland. It was a far cry from the darkness and snow that blanketed the town in winter. Ari Thor was wide awake when the phone rang. He couldn't sleep no matter how hard he tried. He was still using the master bedroom in his place on Eyrargata, the same room he had shared with Kristín and Stefnir before she and the little one moved to Sweden. He had found it hard to adjust when he first moved there from Reykjavik, but the blizzards and gloomy days no longer brought on the same feeling of claustrophobia. He hardly ever felt homesick anymore. In recent years, Siglufjörður had experienced the ripple effects from the new wave of prosperity that was sweeping across southern Iceland in the wake of the financial crisis. Now tourists from all over the world flocked to the small town every summer. Even in winter, people came to enjoy the local ski slopes, most of them from other places in Iceland. Easter had become an especially popular time for visitors, and now on the eve of the long weekend, it looked like the slopes were going to be busy. And I'm just going to jump to the end of the chapter here when following Ari's phone call. 2 minutes later, Ari was fully dressed and stepping outside into the night. He lived just around the corner from the main street, so it would only take a moment for him to get there on foot. It was a windless night and the stars were sparkling in the sky. Nature up here was always wild and unbridled, but at this time of year there was something not just darker about it, but somehow deeper and more distant. Ari arrived on the scene at the same time as the ambulance. As he turned onto Aðalgata, a shiver ran down his spine. On the edge of the pavement, a young woman was lying in a pool of her own blood, her body twisted into so unnatural a position there was little doubt that she must have plunged from a great height. It didn't take a doctor to figure out that she was dead. It looked like all the blood had come from her head. Her skull was likely fractured. As Ari approached the body, he realized the woman was probably even younger than he had first thought, possibly still in her teens. He drew in a sharp breath as he saw her face. Her gaze was eerily absent, her eyes wide open but empty, as if staring into nothing. And Ari immediately knew it was a sight that would haunt him forever.
Thank you, Ragnar. A delicious slice of Icelandic noir there. Wonderful, wonderful. Ian, you've had a chance to read the book. How did you find Winterkill?
Well, it would probably have made it onto my books of the year list, but that would have been very greedy because the third Hulda book I had already decided was going to be on my books of the year list, and I wasn't going to allow Ragnar 2 books. And that other series, which I know we're not really here to promote, but they are extraordinary. The 3 books in that series are amazing. An interesting trajectory for the main character, and very, very moving all the way through. And the third one is absolutely a triumph. So yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. I've only been to Iceland once. I went to do an event at a bookshop in Reykjavik, and my wife and I rented a car, but the car quickly broke down, so we didn't get very far. And it was summer, so you needed blackout blinds because otherwise you couldn't sleep. It was still bright at 4 a.m. But we didn't get to explore Iceland very much because the car didn't work. But we did go and enjoy a hot dog at what was supposedly the most famous hot dog stand in Iceland, because Bill Clinton, I think, had once eaten a hot dog there. It was okay. But yeah, I want to get back, and I want to get back. And that's one of the things I think is one of the glories of crime fiction all over the world, is that it opens your eyes as a reader to these different cultures. And I think that's what Ragnar has done so well, is open up Iceland to the world outside who may never get a chance to visit. And through his books, we can visit. We know something of the politics. We know something of the culture, the people, their philosophy of life, the layout of the land, the long, dark days in winter, the long summer days. All of that we learn: what to eat, what not to eat, what to drink, what not to drink, where to go. And I love that with crime fiction. You get a really great central character. you get big morally complex stories, but also you get this wonderful sense that you are experiencing so much more than would otherwise be the case if you just sat in your little bubble and didn't read widely. So I think for a lot of people around the world, Ragnar has introduced us to Iceland.
I wholeheartedly agree, and I love what you say, that and especially now, where to even leave these bubbles, you know, those of us who've been fortunate enough to travel, it's not happening. And that's what I felt when I was reading Ragnar, that I was taken back to a place that I adore. So thank you so much for that. And before I set off on other people's questions, I just want to ask you, because it's so clear, you know, you've set your books in Siglufjörður, and it's going to be really difficult, I think, to do this, but could you tell us what that place means to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, it's one of my favorite places, of course, and I've been spending summers there ever since I was probably a few months old, and for me, it's just the most peaceful place I can find. And anytime I go there, and I've been there quite often this year actually, it's just, you're sort of overwhelmed by the silence and the fresh air. Even, you have, of course, Iceland, you come to Iceland for the fresh air and whatnot, but even in Siglufjörður, it feels a little bit extra, extra fresh, extra quiet. The smell of the sea and yeah, life just has a slightly slower, it's at a slightly slower pace there.
Ragnar, there's a house that I have in a small fishing village in the far north of Scotland, not the far north, but the north of Scotland, called Cromarty, which is where I usually go and write my books, in peace and quiet and tranquility, with sea views, everything else. Very small place. It doesn't get much sunshine in the winter. I've never set a book there. Now, having set books there, when you go there, do people not say, these things don't happen here? This is terrible. Why would you do this to us?
Actually, they are quite understanding of this problem that I have in having to use their place for my books. And, of course, I owe them, so many apologies for that. No, but they're really friendly, and just from day one. I mean, they've come to me and said that they thank me for using the streets in the right way, etc. So they can actually, even people that don't live in Siglufjörður anymore, speak to me that they feel that they are in a way sort of visiting their old town. Because I try to keep this as true as possible. We have maps at the front of the book, so these are all real places, even though the people are imagined, and they some of them.
Has it now become a tourist attraction? Do fans come there to go around the streets that you've written about?
I think some people actually do, and I've heard, and they're having, there's been a tour at least once of the town by a local tour guide, and I've never done that myself, but if I spent one time there, I would love to do that.
It won't be too long, man. It'll be like Bergen with the Varg Veum books, Gunnar Stallison's books. You'll have a statue of Ari Thor will be there in the middle of town, and people will come and take photographs.
Yeah, I hope so. Why not? But I don't know about the statue though. But
well, we know what it looks like. We know what it looks like now, so it's going to be really easy for the sculptor.
But why haven't you set any book in this place? I mean, I want to visit now when you describe.
Well, I mean, I got close. In one of the Rebus novels, I took him approximately 15 kilometers from the village, the town. But I decided I would stop there. Well, it's because, it's a very small place. It's very safe. It's very friendly. There are no big crimes. There are no murders. So it wouldn't be completely realistic for me to set a crime there. and also I just didn't want to make any enemies. I didn't want anybody to say, why could I didn't mind the fact that there was a murder 20 kilometers away in this other place, because I was never going to go and visit there except to walk along the beach and buy ice cream. But yeah, I just didn't want to do it. I mean, I got in a lot of trouble for, you know, whenever I use real places in my books, there's always somebody who says, why did you have a horrible murder happen in my town? I'm getting too old for the controversy, that's what it is. You're young. You should enjoy the controversy while you still can.
So
Maybe I'll send a book in your small village, Ian, if you don't mind.
You do that for me.
So Ragnar, just a couple of questions that people have been sending in, and this is from Hugo Charles Hansen in Norway. And he says you have your domestic readers who know the Icelandic society and nature very well. And then you have a massive readership abroad who don't have this knowledge. Do you think about this when you write? And how do you go about balancing this so well as you do, showing Iceland to us?
Yeah, honestly, I really don't think about this when I write. I mean, I think I would get into a lot of trouble if I did. I think the books would, you know, gradually become less authentic if I was trying to write for everyone. I mean, I just write the books in Icelandic for my readers in Iceland, but what we have done, I mean, I understand that this, of course, you know, there are things that the Icelandic readers do not need to be explained to them. So what we've done, for example, in the UK, is we have just re-edited the books a little bit and adding information about, you know, Iceland, sort of clarifications here and there, and I think that's worked fine. And in some cases, we've used the English translations as well as the basis of translations all around the world. So I hope, you know, this Iceland finds its way through the books, even though it's just written for the domestic readers initially.
Thank you, thank you. Now, in your head, Ragnar, I wanted to ask this, but Miriam Owen sent this question in. I haven't dared ask it, but it's great when a member of the public asks it. In your head, Ragnar, is Ari Thor going to find a long love with Ugla?
Oh, that's a very good question. Yeah, why not?
I think it would be wonderful. I mean, even if God forbid we don't see this character again, because I really do, but however creativity leads, but I'd love to think of him just, you know, that there would be a real bond and that he wouldn't end up, I don't know, just lonely and isolated. So I do hope that.
I think we, you know, I see him in a good place beyond the book.
Beyond the book, beautiful, beautiful. Could we say the same for Rebus, Ian?
Well, I mean, over the course of the past 30 years, I've given Rebus lots of lovely women to spend time with, and it's never quite worked out for him. At the moment, things are okay. I mean, there's a pathologist who he's you know, it's friends with privileges, so they spend the occasional night together. They've got their own lives, they've got their own careers, etc. But occasionally they get together, they enjoy spending time together. That's probably as good as it gets for Rebus. He can't move in with somebody. He's very set in his ways. Nobody's going to want to move into his apartment. It's very much a bachelor pad. So I think that's as good as it's going to get. But he's got a dog, and he's kind of been reunited with his daughter, for better or worse. And you know, I mean, his demons are still there. I don't think the demons will ever go. And now the extra demon he has, now that he's long retired, is does he still make a difference to the world? Does he still have a role to play in the world? Or is he yesterday's man? And he's very keen not to be yesterday's man, which makes him a sort of soulmate to the gangster Cafferty in the books, who's also wondering the same thing. Surrounded by younger, more venal gangsters who all want his empire. And does he still have the guts and the ability and the drive to keep taking on these fights, or is it time to walk away from the boxing ring? And both men are going through these crises in their kind of, you know, in their psychological lives, in their psyche. So yeah, I mean, I think in the later books he's fairly relaxed compared to the early books. He's not quite as tortured as he was up to Black and Blue and maybe The Hanging Garden. I think he's a little bit calmer. He's in a better place, and he's moved flats now. Hooray! So he's moved into a flat that's much easier to look after. And now that he's taking his dog for a walk and not smoking as much and drinking as much, he can live for a few more years.
And who knows, that friend with benefits may become something else. You never know. Now, I have another question that I'd like to ask, and in both of your books, and I know you haven't conferred whilst you were writing your books, but both of you at some point mention the possibility of leaving the doors unlocked. Yeah, so in Siglufjörður, and then up where his daughter's living, the possibility of leaving those doors unlocked. And it struck me that you both seem to write with a sense of nostalgia. Ragnar, are you a nostalgic writer?
Yeah, I think I am. And you wouldn't really see it in this book, but basically, you know, everything else, everything I've written in the past few years has been set in the past. You know, not the distant past, but you know, yeah. I mean, the next book that's out in the UK next year is set in the 1980s. So was The Mist, actually, the Ian referred to earlier, and I'm even working on one more that's set around that time, and that is partly nostalgia, because that was, you know, time, you know, period that I remember and enjoyed as just a kid, and things are all so much more magical when you're a kid, and I think that's you want to go back to that place. But also for crime novels, I mean, the time before mobile phones and before Google and the internet, I mean, it's a much more interesting time, much easier to work with.
Yeah, but it's a lot of work as well, Ragnar. It's a lot of, you've got to do a lot of research if you're going to set your books in the past. How much was a beer? What kind of cars would they be driving? Did they have automatic locking, etc.? I know this because my secret project this year, which I'm now allowed to talk about, is that I was approached by the estate of William McIlvanney, a very famous Scottish crime writer, who had died 5 years ago, leaving an unfinished manuscript, which would be a prequel, which would be the first novel in his sequence using his character Laidlaw. And they asked me if I would finish it. And that book is set in 1972. And so a lot of what I had to do was to think back to Glasgow, which is a city I didn't ever know at that time. I mean, in 72, I was 12 years old. So trying to think back to 1972 and trying to think back to Glasgow in 1972. And it was a lot of research had to be done. And so all the benefit, you do have benefits as a crime writer. I mean, in the present day, as Ragnar, I'm sure will say, it's a pain in the bum, because there's CCTV and there's mobile phones and there's DNA analysis, and it's so much easier now to investigate a crime in some ways than it was in the past. Whenever we're writing books now set in the present day, we immediately have to think, okay, they've got a mobile phone. Why don't they just phone the police? Help, I'm being kidnapped. You know, so you've got to factor in all that stuff. And if you go into the past, you can relax a little bit. Things were a bit more about detection and about using your instincts, becoming a Hercule Poirot or a Sherlock Holmes, rather than you know, CSI. And there's something nice about that, looking back to the past, and maybe that feeds into that nostalgia thing. This notion that in the past you could walk away from your house, leave it unlocked, and be pretty certain that no one was going to break in, because your neighbours were keeping an eye open for you, and there weren't any bad people out there to break in anyway. maybe we do hark back to that a little bit. Crime fiction does that. Crime fiction deals with the fears of its audience, but also tries to reassure them that in a perfect world, crimes will be investigated, resolved, and the guilty will be punished.
And I think both of you bring us detectives for whom being able to bring that resolution is really important.
Is that something you learned, Ragnar, from? I know you had a huge interest in Agatha Christie books and translated them. Did you learn from her about resolution, about needing an ending for the reader?
I think I really learned a lot from her because I spent a lot of time translating her books, and when I started writing, I think I sort of had her own, her structure in mind as their way to write a novel, just subconsciously, but again, it's really fun to work with breaking the rules as well, and not to have a perfect resolution. And it's really exciting, Ian, to hear about your project this week with the McIlvanney family. I mean, how fantastic will that be to see? Is it next year? Or?
I hope so. Yeah, next September, October. So by the time I come to Iceland, I will have that book with me. Yeah, I mean, I'm still working on it, but it's nearly there. It's nearly there. And the biggest compliment I've had so far is that the editor, McIlvanney's widow, Siobhan, and my wife who've read it have all said we cannot see the join. We cannot see where it stops being McIlvanney and starts to be you writing, which is what I wanted. I wanted to be his story, his world, his voice, not mine.
Yeah.
So that was really important to me.
Excellent. And going back maybe into the question you raised earlier about the difficulty in finding out the price of beer. Because that's not a problem for me, because beer was actually banned in Iceland until 1989.
Dear
so
God, dear
price.
God, how did you survive? No wonder you've got a high suicide rate.
All the strong alcohol was allowed, but beer was outlawed.
Good God.
Yeah, it makes
That's
no
a
sense.
barbaric country.
It is, yeah.
Well, all I can say is if I'm coming next year, there better be beer.
There will be beer, yeah.
There is now.
Okay. There will be beer or there will be blood.
Karen,
Ragnar, what if, I know Sophie Hannah has done this, but would you ever be interested in writing something, in the style of Agatha Christie?
Absolutely, why not? I mean, I love that era, and I love that, Golden Age style, and yeah, I'm always, thinking about that in one way or the other. And in one of the books that I've read, the one that I wrote last year in Iceland, there's a lead character who is a Golden Age fan. So we bring up a lot. I bring up a lot of classic Golden Age titles. He's reading books throughout the investigation, and that's it's my first step into trying to put the Golden Age of detective fiction into my books. So yeah, I mean, one way or the other, I mean, I think I hopefully will be able to do something.
To do that. It's interesting that I mean, this is still very much, and even your Hulda books to some extent are still very much in the spirit of Agatha Christie, which is quite refreshing, actually, because a lot of crime fiction can follow, as you were discussing earlier, sort of the same themes, same tropes, and these are obviously older tropes. But I don't know. There's not the violence that sort of permeates so much of what we read now. And I mean, this is such a brilliant book. And I mean, Ragnar, you have had unbelievable praise for your writing recently, which must be kind of hard to believe when only 6 years ago you were only published in Iceland.
Yeah, it's yeah, it is. Yeah, it's always, just knowing that someone's reading my books outside of Iceland is just usually enough. Make me very happy.
Yeah, well, I am honored to publish this book, and we were so excited to hear that Ari Thor was returning, and we were returning to Siglufjörður, which I can now say without reading my phonetically.
I cannot.
Oh, sure you can. But these are two amazing books. And Ian, I loved this. This was fantastic. I read it in one night when I was supposed to be editing, and I won't say who I was supposed to be editing. Brilliant.
Well, I mean, I've got to say, I mean, and this is something that Ragnar should take on board, is that, you know, having written 23, 24 books in the series, it's so heartening to me that people are saying this is the best, or this is amongst the best you've written. So, you know, there's hope for all of us that we keep getting better as we get older. We don't just fall off a cliff in terms of style and substance and everything else. So I've really been cheered. And you know what? It was written during lockdown. It was written as an escape for me from lockdown. So maybe that was part of the magic that made it the book that it is.
That it is. That's incredible, actually. But it's interesting because there are, and again, we won't say anything about who these authors are, but there are authors who have fell into using a formula for their crime.
Oh, let's talk about them. Who are they? Right, I'm going to take them. I'm taking names.
No, but it's interesting, isn't it, that both of you have done something, you know, continue to excel in what you do, and you're being now held up, as I was just reading the back of your book here, Ian, you know, leading novelist in any genre. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that, does it?
That's quite an old quote, though, Karen. That's an old, that quote is from before Ragnar was born, I think.
That's okay. We'll take it.
But you know, he's done something I can only marvel at, which is with the Hulda books, this notion of going backwards. I mean, I did it in one of the Rebus books. I think it's Hanging Garden. There is a kind of bit of it that goes back in time to Rebus's daughter actually being born. Because it starts with her being hit by a car when she's in her, I don't know, teens. But to actually do a sequence of books that go back from the kind of final case of the detective to an early case of detective, I just think it's brilliant. And as soon as I finish reading them, I want to go back and read them again to work out how the hell he did it.
I know. Although I really hated him after I read the first one because I was
really.
I know. The unforgivable. No, I know that's masterclass writing. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Amazing, Ragnar. From those early days of playing football, look where we've ended up.
And look, he's so shy, he's so quiet. It's just lovely. It's just there is an ego. There is people watching at home. There is an ego there. Trust me, there is an ego. I've played football against this guy. He wants to win. He wants to win.
That guy too. He played for Scotland one year, didn't he?
No, he played for England when I played against him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first time I actually won in Scotland was when I was playing with Scotland.
Yeah.
That's the way it is, man. That's the way it is. Yeah. Small countries got to stick together. In bed with an elephant. We're all in bed with an elephant.
Yeah. There were a few of my authors changed allegiance that year, but never mind. Yeah, as you can see from all over the place, they all became Scottish. Interesting, but I can see Sophie has appeared here, and we haven't, I'm sorry everyone, we probably haven't answered even a quarter of your questions, although I think looking at them, I think a lot of them have come up in the discussion. And so on that note, I'm going to thank Jackie very much for leading the proceedings, and Ian, thank you so much for coming along to celebrate the publication of Winterkill. It's actually out on Thursday, but I say we're launched. Thanks to David Warner for the amazing translation, which this is an exquisitely written book and it is also exquisitely translated. You can get signed copies for Christmas at Goldsboro Books. And Ian, you signed some specially, didn't you, for this? I think there are some signed, my books, signed at Goldsboro. I did some and they were packaged and sent down to Goldsboro, so they should have a few. Yep. Yeah, so this is, they have lots actually. So this they've mostly sold. Get in quick, folks, get in quick. They've nearly all gone. This is true. And Ragnar, I should tell you that in advance of publication, which is Thursday, we have just reprinted your hardback. Wow. So this is hugely exciting. This is the first time we've done a trade hardback. So we usually do a Goldsboro exclusive, and this one is a Goldsboro exclusive, and that's what you'll get from Goldsboro, I believe, which is a signed and numbered special edition. But we also did one for independent bookshops, and we did one for the trade, so Waterstones and everything else, and they are flying out of the shops. So congratulations, Ragnar. And thank you all for coming, and hopefully, well, have a wonderful Christmas. And hopefully 2021 will bring better days for all of us. And it's been a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
And Jackie, thank you very much. That was fantastic. I hope we can do it in person someday.
I would love that. I've still like oodles of questions left. So yes,
Next time.
Next time. Thank you.
Me too. I was dying to ask questions the whole time. I had to.
As long as Ragnar and I can do it in French, we'll do it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you, Ian, for doing this with me, and Jackie and Karen for publishing this for us. I mean, it's thank you so much, guys, and everyone who came and watched.
Yeah, it's been great. It's been a pleasure.
Really
Total pleasure. Total pleasure.
Have a great Christmas, everybody. We'll see you on the other side of COVID.
Yes.
Oh, please. Yeah. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye, guys. Bye.
Thanks, Sophie.
Bye.
Who's
Bye.
finding?